Be me, Kiana. Not too long ago, I was handed the keys to the kingdom, CEO of a mid-sized tech company. The board wanted a fresh perspective, a real paradigm shift. They got one. When I walked in for the first time as the boss, I could practically smell the testosterone. It wasn't just a workplace, it was a clubhouse. The previous CEO had built a functional company, sure. It made money, but it was stagnant. It had no soul, no vision for a better, more equitable future. The energy was just heavy. You know the kind. A dozen or so male engineers huddled together like they were defending a fortress. The jokes were quiet when I walked by. The camaraderie felt exclusionary. My mission wasn't just to increase quarterly profits. It was to heal the very culture of the place, to build a space where collaboration replaced competition, where empathy was valued over aggression. My first week was purely observational. I walked the floors, sat in on meetings, listened, and I saw it all. The subtle eye rolls when a female colleague spoke, the tech bro jargon designed to keep people out. The whole system was built by men, for men. I knew I couldn't just trim the branches. I had to pull the whole thing up by the roots. My first major initiative was a new flagship project, something that would put us on the map as forward-thinking innovators. I called a big meeting with the senior development team. I laid out my vision. It was ambitious, I'll admit. It was more about the user's emotional journey than the raw code. I wanted to create a platform that was intuitive, empathetic, a digital safe space. After my presentation, the room was quiet. Then he spoke. Christopher. He was the lead engineer. One of those guys who'd been there forever. He had this calm, patronizing air about him. The kind of man who thinks he's the smartest person in every room. He didn't raise his voice. That's how they get you. He started talking about technical feasibility and resource allocation, using a very calm, very measured tone to explain to me, the CEO, how my vision was essentially a fantasy. He wasn't aggressive. He was worse. He was paternalistic. Every sentence felt like a pat on the head. He was using jargon as a weapon, creating a wall of complexity to hide behind. He talked about server architecture and database limitations. All I heard was, slow down, think smaller, let the men handle the real work. It was the most masterful display of mansplaining I had ever witnessed firsthand. He was poisoning the well, planting seeds of doubt in the rest of the team before we'd even begun. He thought he was being logical, but he was really just being a gatekeeper. He was defending his old, comfortable world from my new, challenging one. I let him finish his little speech. I smiled politely and thanked him for his input. I knew right then that he had to go. He was a relic. He was an anchor holding the entire company back. You can't build the future when the past is sitting at the head of your engineering department, telling you what's impossible. A couple of days later, I called him into my office. I told him we were moving in a new creative direction, and his skill set was no longer aligned with our vision. He was shocked, genuinely shocked. He asked for a specific reason, for performance metrics. It was sad, really. He couldn't comprehend that his entire worldview was the problem. It wasn't about a line of code he wrote. It was about the toxic mindset he represented. I kept it professional and vague. HR handled the details. The shockwave that went through the office was palpable. I had taken out their king. The other men looked at me differently after that, a mix of fear and resentment. Good. It meant they understood a new sheriff was in town. With Christopher gone, the project could finally breathe. But the cultural problem remained. The boys' club was wounded, but not dead. The ringleader of that was a project manager named Kai. Kai was one of those guys everyone supposedly likes. Charismatic, funny, always organizing things. That was precisely the problem. His idea of team building was organizing video game tournaments after work, or a weekly poker night. All things that are, on the surface, harmless. But you have to look deeper. Who do these activities appeal to? Who feels comfortable in those hyper-competitive, male-dominated environments? I saw the female employees politely decline the invitations, and I saw how the men who participated formed this inner circle. They had inside jokes. They built relationships that excluded others. This wasn't a team. It was a fraternity with a payroll department. I tried to offer alternatives. I suggested a book club, a mindfulness and meditation session in the afternoons, a collaborative art project for the break room. I was trying to build bridges, to create inclusive social activities. I spoke to Kai about it directly. I told him I wanted to pivot our after-work culture to be more welcoming to everyone. He smiled that easy, charming smile of his. He said he understood, but the people just wanted to blow off steam. He told me it wasn't that deep, that they were just games. He didn't get it. Or he refused to get it. He was protecting his social kingdom. The final straw was some big gaming tournament he set up. It was the talk of the office for a week. It created a clear divide, the participants and the non-participants, the in-group and the out-group. I couldn't allow my company culture to be dictated by who had the best kill-to-death ratio. His dismissal was even cleaner than Christopher's. The reason was failing to foster an inclusive team environment. It was perfectly corporate, perfectly defensible. When he left, the social heart of the old guard was ripped out. The office became quiet. The laughter died down. Some might call that a loss of morale. I called it a detoxification. We were no longer a frat house. We were a professional place of business. The rest of the men fell like dominoes over the next month or two. It was a quiet, methodical process. One engineer was let go for his abrasive communication style. He was just arguing in meetings, really. Another was fired for lack of collaborative spirit. He preferred to work with his headphones on, a classic sign of refusing to integrate. It was a war of attrition. The last one to go was the IT guy, Cameron. He was quiet. He just sat in his little room, fixed our computers, and never said a word to anyone. Harmless, you might think. But his presence was a symbol. He was the last remnant of the old world. And frankly, I wanted to achieve a 100% female workforce. It was a powerful statement, a message to the world about what we were building. Finding a reason for him was tricky. He never did anything wrong. In the end, it was a simple departmental restructuring. We were outsourcing our IT support. It wasn't even a lie. We did, eventually. The day he packed his box and left, I walked out of my office and took a deep breath. It was done. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner. The cleansing was complete. Now, the real work could begin. My first hire for the new era was my right hand, Zoe. I'd known her for years. She understood my vision on a cellular level. She became my chief people officer. Her job was to guard the gates, to ensure that every new hire was a perfect cultural fit. Together, we built the dream team. We hired Madeline, a brilliant coder who had told us in her interview that she'd left her last 3 jobs because of the toxic bro culture. She was a perfect fit, eager, talented, and on our side. We hired Camilla to run our social media. Her portfolio wasn't huge, but her personal blog was a masterclass in feminist theory. She understood the message. We filled every department with smart, passionate, and most importantly, ideologically aligned women. The office transformed. The tense silence was replaced by a vibrant hum of conversation. We replaced the rigid morning stand-up meetings with circles of trust. We'd start the day by sharing our feelings, our anxieties, our triumphs. We weren't just colleagues. We were sisters on a mission. Productivity was no longer measured in lines of code or closed tickets. We focused on new metrics: emotional contribution, collaborative spirit, vision alignment. Camilla was doing incredible work on our social media, rebranding us as a feminist powerhouse. The engagement was through the roof. We were getting noticed. We were being praised as pioneers. Of course, there were bumps in the road. Rebuilding from the ground up is never easy. The first sign of trouble came from one of our biggest clients, a legacy account from the old days. They called me directly. Some gruff-sounding man on the other end of the line. He was complaining that their project had seen zero progress in over a month. He was talking about missed deadlines and unfulfilled promises. I was baffled. Our team was working harder than ever. The energy in the office was electric. I called a meeting with the project team, led by Madeleine. I asked for an update. Madeleine looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes. She started talking about the codebase. Apparently, Christopher had built a complex but elegant system, but he'd left behind very little documentation. It was like he had built a cathedral and taken the blueprints with him. She said that Kai, the old project manager, had understood the whole system intuitively and could navigate it. She explained that her team was spending all their time just trying to understand how things worked, let alone build new features. I was profoundly disappointed. Here I had given Madeleine the opportunity of a lifetime, a seat at the head of a brilliant, all-female engineering team. And instead of innovating, she was making excuses. Instead of finding a new, feminine way to approach the problem, she was complaining that the old masculine way was too hard to understand. It was a classic case of internalized misogyny. She had been so conditioned by the male-dominated tech world that she couldn't imagine a solution that didn't involve the men who had built the prison in the first place. I told her that I didn't want to hear about what Christopher or Kai used to do. I wanted to hear what her team was going to do now. I told her to think outside the box, to deconstruct the old system and build something better in its place. The meeting ended on a tense note. I could see the frustration on Madeleine's face. It was the frustration of someone being pushed to be better than they thought they could be. It was a good thing. A week later, the real crisis hit. It was a Friday evening. I was just packing up, feeling good about the week. Then my phone started blowing up. It was Zoe, frantic messages. The main servers were down, all of them. Our entire platform was offline. Our clients were dead in the water. Panic set in. In the old days, Cameron would have handled this. He would have gone into his little room, typed furiously for 20 minutes, and everything would have been fine. But Cameron was gone. Madeleine and her team were called in. They worked through the night. They couldn't figure it out. The system was too complex, too interconnected. It was like a Jenga tower, and they didn't know which block to pull. By Saturday morning, we were still dark. The financial losses were mounting. I made the call to hire an outside emergency IT consultant. A team of them came in. It was galling. They were all men. They walked into our beautiful, curated space like an invading army. They spoke in clipped, technical shorthand and ignored most of us. It took them almost the entire weekend to fix it. The bill was astronomical, but the worst part was the diagnosis. The lead consultant told me it was a routine server maintenance script that had failed, a script that, according to the logs, had been running flawlessly every week for 3 years. He said it should have been a simple fix if you knew the system. The implication was clear. Cameron would have fixed it in his sleep. The consultant also mentioned something else that chilled me to the bone. He said the system had a number of unusual custom configurations. He called it brittle. Powerful, but brittle. He said it required constant, expert maintenance. I knew what had happened. It was obvious. This was sabotage. Cameron, the quiet, unassuming IT guy, he had done this. Before he left, he must have planted a time bomb in the code. A little farewell gift from the patriarchy. It was a cowardly, vindictive attack designed to make us fail. He couldn't stand to see us succeed without him. The men couldn't build something that lasted, so they made sure to break it on their way out. I told Zoe my theory. She agreed completely. We had been naive. We thought they would just leave quietly. We had underestimated their toxicity, their fragility. We had kicked over their anthill, and now they were trying to bite us from the grave. The server incident shook us, but it also hardened our resolve. We were not just building a company anymore. We were fighting a war, and we were not going to lose. But the cracks were starting to show, not just in the code, but in the team. The utopian energy of the first few weeks was beginning to fade. The circles of trust were becoming sessions of passive-aggressive complaints. Camilla was complaining that Madeleine's team wasn't providing her with new features to announce on social media. Madeleine was complaining that Camilla's social media posts were promising things the platform couldn't actually do. Zoe was running around putting out fires, trying to mediate, but the stress was getting to everyone. I felt like a mother trying to manage a household of brilliant but squabbling children. I was holding it all together through sheer force of will. I knew this was just a phase, a period of adjustment. We had to unlearn all the toxic lessons the old world had taught us. We had to find a new way to work, a new way to be. I believed in my team. I believed in my vision. I just never imagined how deep the poison of the old world ran. And I had no idea that the real attack, the one that would bring everything crashing down, hadn't even started yet. It was coming from a place I never thought to check, and it was being led by the very people I had vanquished. The atmosphere in our new utopia was becoming complicated. It's a natural part of any revolutionary process. The initial euphoria gives way to the hard work of building a new society. Madeleine's engineering team was missing deadlines consistently. When I pressed her for reasons, she would talk about technical debt left by the old team. It was a convenient excuse, blaming the ghosts of the men we'd exiled. It felt weak. I expected her to rise to the occasion, to innovate her way out of the problem. Instead, she seemed to be drowning in it. The other departments were feeling the strain. Camilla couldn't launch her new marketing campaigns because the features she was supposed to promote were never finished. This led to friction. In our circles of trust, the sharing became less about empowerment and more about thinly veiled accusations. "I feel unsupported by the engineering department," Camilla would say, looking directly at Madeleine. "I feel like marketing is making promises we can't keep," Madeleine would shoot back. I had to mediate constantly. I felt less like a CEO and more like a therapist. I told them that this was the patriarchy's final trick. It had planted seeds of competition in us, and we had to actively work to overcome them. Some of them seemed to get it. Zoe was always there, backing me up, reinforcing the message, but others. I could see the doubt in their eyes. The company's financials were starting to look grim. We were losing clients. The ones who stayed were complaining. I had to spend most of my days on the phone, soothing angry account managers, promising them that our internal restructuring would soon lead to unprecedented innovation. It was exhausting, holding the line for a vision that lesser minds were struggling to grasp. Then came the day it all fell apart. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think. Zoe burst into my office. She didn't even knock. Her face was pale, and she was holding her laptop like it was a venomous snake. "Kiana, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. She put the laptop on my desk. The screen was open to a website, Glassdoor. "They're attacking us," she whispered. "It's coordinated." I leaned forward, a sense of weary annoyance washing over me. Of course, the last resort of the mediocre man. Anonymous online reviews. The company's rating, which had been a respectable 4.2 when I took over, was now a dismal 1.5. I started reading. The first review was from a user named SeniorDev85, obviously Christopher. "Leadership has no technical understanding and sees expertise as a threat," it began. It went on to describe, in painstaking detail, the meeting where I had unveiled my new project. He framed my vision as nonsensical and his mansplaining as a calm attempt to inject reality into the conversation. He ended by saying, "CEO creates a hostile environment for anyone who disagrees with her. Merit means nothing here. Only ideological purity matters." It was signed with 1 star. Stay away. I snorted. The bitterness was practically dripping off the screen. The next one was titled, "Fun is Forbidden." It had to be Kai. "A once great company culture has been systematically destroyed," he wrote. "I was fired for organizing a video game tournament, which was deemed not inclusive. The new management has replaced collaboration with paranoia. You're constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that some normal human interaction will be misinterpreted as a thought crime." He continued, "If you're a man, don't even think about applying. If you're a woman who just wants to do good work without a side of political lecturing, I'd also advise you to look elsewhere." Another 1-star review. I scrolled down. There were more. From the engineer who had an abrasive communication style, from the guy who liked his headphones, even, to my surprise, a short one from Cameron, the IT guy. "Unprofessional and chaotic," it read. "Leadership dismantled a functional IT system out of sheer incompetence and paranoia. The place is a ticking time bomb." I pointed to the screen. "You see, Zoe, this is proof." "Proof of what?" she asked, confused. "Proof that we did the right thing," I explained patiently. "This is what toxic masculinity looks like when it's cornered. It can't build anything, so it just tries to tear things down. This is the desperate tantrum of irrelevant men." I was about to close the laptop, to dismiss it all as the pathetic whining of the justly fired. I was planning my countermove, a beautiful, defiant blog post about our company's brave stand against online misogyny. But then Zoe said, "There's one more. It's new. It just appeared." I looked back at the screen. A new review had indeed just been posted. The title was, "I believed in the mission. I was wrong." My blood ran cold. The review was from an anonymous user, but it was signed "Former Female Software Engineer." There was only one person that could be: Madeleine. She had quit the Friday before, sending a terse 2-sentence email. I had assumed she just couldn't handle the pressure. I started reading her post, and the world seemed to slow down. "I joined this company because I was inspired by the CEO's vision of creating a female-led workspace free of the tech industry's toxicity," it started. For the first few weeks, it felt like a dream, but the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. My hands started to shake. The company is run by a CEO who is a master of rhetoric, but utterly incompetent at leadership. The best engineers were fired not for performance, but for questioning her ill-conceived and technically impossible ideas. The supportive, sisterly environment we were promised is a lie. It's a culture of fear, backstabbing, and blame. Productivity is non-existent because the most competent people were purged and replaced by loyalists who are good at talking the talk but can't walk the walk. The final, horrifying truth is this: everything the men who were fired said in their reviews is 100% true. I witnessed it. I tried to fix it from the inside, but you can't fix a system whose core belief is that ideology is more important than reality. She ended with a sentence that felt like a physical blow. This isn't a feminist utopia. It's a cult of personality, and it's circling the drain. I have never been more disappointed or professionally embarrassed in my life. 1 star, run, betrayal. A deep, burning sense of betrayal washed over me. I had given her everything: a leadership position, a safe space, a chance to be part of something revolutionary, and she had turned on me. She had stabbed me in the back with the same rusty knives as the men we had fought so hard to overcome. She was weak. She had absorbed their poison, and now she was spitting it back at us. "She was never one of us," I said to Zoe, my voice dangerously quiet. She was a Trojan horse. But the damage was done. Madeline's review was the key that unlocked the floodgates. It gave all the other reviews credibility. It was the "I'm a woman, and I'm telling you it's true" that the world needed to hear. Within hours, it started. Screenshots of Madeline's review appeared on Twitter. A thread about our company popped up on a popular tech subreddit. It had thousands of upvotes. Tech bloggers, smelling blood in the water, started writing articles. How our company's name became a case study in how not to run a business. The feminist CEO whose utopian dream became a Glassdoor nightmare. Our name, my name, was everywhere. We were no longer pioneers. We were a punchline, a cautionary tale. The next morning, the phone calls started. First, it was the clients, the few that remained. They were pulling out, all of them. They couldn't be associated with this kind of public relations disaster. Then, it was the investors. The chairman of the board called me. His voice was cold as ice. "Kiana, my office, tomorrow morning, be there." He hung up before I could reply. I walked into the boardroom the next day. It was all of them, the entire board, a panel of grim-faced men in expensive suits. The same men who had hired me, who had praised my bold vision. They didn't offer me a seat. The chairman had a stack of papers in front of him. He pushed them across the table. They were printouts, the Glassdoor reviews, the blog posts, the articles, and underneath it all, a financial report. The numbers were a sea of red ink. Revenue had plummeted. Our stock valuation was in free fall. "Explain this," the chairman said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I took a deep breath. This was my moment, my chance to make them understand. I started to talk about my vision, about the toxic culture I had inherited. I explained that we were in a transitional period, that true innovation is always preceded by disruption. I told them the Glassdoor reviews were a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled former employees who couldn't adapt to a new, more progressive paradigm. I was eloquent. I was passionate. I was right. And they just stared at me. Their eyes were blank, devoid of understanding. It was like I was speaking a foreign language. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence. Then one of them, a man I'd barely spoken to before, leaned forward. "So, your vision," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "is to drive the company into bankruptcy in the name of—" "What, exactly?" I tried to respond, but the chairman cut me off. "That's enough," he said. "We've heard enough." He slid one last piece of paper across the table. It was a severance agreement. "The board has lost all confidence in your leadership," he stated, as if reading from a script. "Your tenure as CEO is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings." I looked at their faces, all of them, and I finally understood. They weren't angry because the company was failing. They were angry because a woman had dared to try something they couldn't control. They had put me on a glass cliff, hoping I'd fall. And when I stumbled, instead of helping, they pushed. They were afraid of my strength, afraid of my vision. I didn't say another word. I didn't sign the paper. I just turned and walked out of the room with as much dignity as I could muster. A security guard I'd never seen before was waiting for me. He followed me to my office. My beautiful office. The one I had filled with plants and inspiring art. He stood in the doorway watching me as I put a few personal items into a small cardboard box. My team, my girls, they peeked out of their offices. Their faces were a mixture of fear and confusion. Zoe was crying. I wanted to go to them, to tell them to keep fighting, to not let the men win. But the guard just pointed towards the elevator. My time was up, and now I'm sitting here, in a coffee shop a few blocks away. The box with my things is on the floor next to me. I'm watching the rain streak down the window. I feel strangely calm. They took my company. They took my title. But they can't take my vision. I failed. But not because my ideas were wrong. I failed because I was ahead of my time. The world is not yet ready for a truly female-led future. The patriarchy is a wounded beast, and it lashes out with ferocious power in its death throes. The men I fired were its claws. The women like Madeleine who betrayed me were its poison. The board of directors was its cold, calculating brain. I see that now. I'm opening my laptop. The severance agreement can wait. I have something more important to write. A new blog post. I think I know the title. They can't silence a revolution. People need to hear the truth of what happened. They need to understand the forces we are truly up against. This isn't the end for me. It's a new beginning. I've learned a valuable lesson. You can't reform a broken system from within. You have to build your own. I think my next venture will be in consulting. Yes, I'll start my own firm. I'll teach other companies how to build truly inclusive, progressive, and fearless workplaces. I'll teach them how to avoid the mistakes I made. I'll teach them how to identify the saboteurs and the traitors before it's too late. My story isn't a failure. It's the first chapter, and I'm the only one who gets to write the rest of it.